leg curl with row is a posterior oblique sling strengthening exercise. So it's a lat to opposite glute, stabilizing across the SI joint, and then also strengthening across the posterior chain. With the poor man's leg curl with row, we want to attach a band overhead if you have a pull-up attachment or a power rack, or you can do it over the top of a door frame. If you do it over the top of the door frame, you may need to adjust your stance a little bit, so maybe you might be a little bit more angled. So either your feet will probably be by the door, or you can even do it more laterally. So with the band attached overhead, I'm gonna find my elevated surface that's at least a foot in height. You can use a small bench, you can use a normal workout bench, you can use a chair or a step stool. I'm gonna come down onto my back with my band attached overhead. So this is my work arm, the one that's holding the band, and then the opposite leg is gonna be the one that's driving into the bench. And I wanna focus on driving down into the bench with my heel as opposed to my flat foot. So my heel is gonna be on top of my elevated surface. And so from here, I'm gonna think exhale to drive through this heel to extend in my hip as I row the band back at the same time. So inhale, lower down, exhale, extend in the hip as I row back at the same time. Now, if this is too challenging, we could bring both feet down to the bench and we could do a simultaneous heel drive through both legs. So I'm gonna take exhale, drive through both heels as I pull the band back, and then inhale to lower down. Exhale, drive and row, inhale to lower down. With this variation, I could take a Pilates ball and put it between my thighs and squeeze as I row the band back, or I can use a mini band and put it around my thighs, which will emphasize a little bit more of hip abduction or the outer glutes, while the Pilates ball will emphasize more of the inner thighs. Now, if this variation was still too much for me with my feet elevated, I can regress it to more of a glute bridge position. So I can bring both heels down onto the floor. So this is gonna be a heel drive emphasized glute bridge. So as opposed to my feet being flat, I'm gonna have my heels be the thing that I'm driving through. Exhale, drive through the heels as I row down, and then inhale to release. So this is gonna be more of a hamstring emphasized glute bridge. So exhale, drive as I row, inhale to lower, and then you can also do this single leg. So now this opposite leg, I'm gonna drive through the heel as I row, inhale to lower down. Another modification that we can do is we can do a hip thrust to row instead of a poor man's leg curl or the glute bridge. Sometimes being flat on our back or even in an elevated position like the poor man's leg curl can aggravate any sort of like stomach or GI issues that you're having. So from here, I'm gonna drive into my heels, and then I'm gonna exhale to extend my hip as I row down at the same time. I wanna make sure that my arm can clear the elevated surface so I can still maintain that range of motion, and then inhale to lower down. Exhale, pull, inhale to down. And then again, I can emphasize that single leg position as well, where I lift one foot, lower down, really focusing on driving in that heel. So we have a lot of variations of the poor man's leg curl. You can elevate the feet, you either have just one foot driving or both as we row at the same time. You can bring it down to the floor to do a glute bridge variation where we emphasize the heel drive with both feet or just one foot. Or we can regress to a hip thrusted position with either both feet or one foot down. Just making sure if you're doing the one-sided, you're rowing with the opposite arm so we can activate that posterior oblique sling. If you can't figure out an overhead attachment for the poor man's leg curl and row, we can do a poor man's leg curl dumbbell pull over. So you'll still have your elevated surface and you'll have one dumbbell. So I'll come onto my back. I'm going to put my one foot onto the elevated surface so you can drive that heel into the top of it. And then I'm going to bring that weight overhead. So the weight can sometimes touch the floor over your head. If you find that when you reach overhead, you really begin to arch, don't bring the weight quite as far down. So maybe this is a better range of motion for me. So from here, I'm going to bring this weight and pull it towards my hips as I extend in the hip at the same time. So I'm going to exhale to drive through that heel as I pull the weight up. And then inhale to lower down. Exhale, pull the weight up. Inhale to lower down. So this is still going to be working on that posterior oblique sling, but it'll be a different setup depending on your equipment. So exhale, pull the weight up. Inhale to lower back down.